Hi, boys and girls. Welcome to the exciting family of Stories That Live. On this cassette tape, you will hear the stories of Joseph the Dreamer, the slave who became a prime minister, and Joseph's dreams come true, the story of baby Moses, the sea that opened up, and Joshua, the champion at Jericho. Now, open storybook number 2 and read along as you listen to the greatest stories in the world.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Don't let Satan blow it out, I'm gonna let it shine. Don't let Satan blow it out, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Hide it under a bushel, no, I'm gonna let it shine. Hide it under a bushel, no, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Let it shine till Jesus comes, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine till Jesus comes, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Jacob had 12 sons. One son, whose name was Joseph, was Daddy's favorite boy. When the boy was 17 years old, Jacob made a coat for him, a coat of many colors. In those days, some colors were hard to get, so this coat was real special. Joseph's brothers hated him because they were jealous of his beautiful coat. To make matters worse, Joseph had a dream which he told his brothers. We were binding bundles of grain in the field when my sheaf stood up. Your sheaf stood up too, and they bowed to my sheaf. His brother snorted. Ha! So you think you're going to rule over us? You think a lot of yourself, Joseph. Joseph had another dream. He dreamt that the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed down to his star. He told his father. His dad said, Now, Joseph, you don't really think that your mother and I and your brothers should bow to you, do you? Joseph's older brothers watched their father's sheep at Dothan. One day, Jacob called for his son. Joseph, how would you like to go and see how your brothers are doing? I'd love to, Dad, he replied. So off he went. When his brothers saw him coming, they began to whisper to each other. Let's kill him, said one. But Reuben, the oldest brother, suggested that they put him in a pit. Then they would tear his beautiful coat and dip it in blood and bring it to their father. Just then, some salesmen came riding by on their camels. They sold Joseph to the salesman for 20 pieces of silver. When the brothers came home from the field, they showed their father the coat. Say, Dad, we found this torn, blood-stained coat in the field. Do you think it could be Joseph's? Jacob looked at the coat. It's Joseph's, he began to sob. Joseph has been killed by a wild animal. For many years, Jacob would believe that his son was dead.
In shady green pastures so rich and so sweet, God leads his dear children along. Where the waters cool flow bathes the weary one's feet, God leads his dear children along. Some through the water, some through the flood, some through the fire, but all through the blood. Some through great sorrow, but God gives a song in the night season and all the day long.
When the salesmen came to Egypt, they sold Joseph to Potiphar, the king's officer. God was with Joseph, so that Potiphar made him ruler over all his possessions. Through trickery, Potiphar's wife had Joseph put into prison. But God was with him there too. The jail warden put all the inmates under Joseph's care. One morning, 2 of the newest prisoners came to Joseph. One was Pharaoh's servant. The other was his baker. They each had had a dream and wanted Joseph to tell them what it meant. God gave Joseph the meaning of the dreams. The baker was to die. And Pharaoh's servant would get his old job back. It happened exactly the way Joseph had said it would. Joseph said to the king's servant, "When you serve the king again, remember me. Ask the king if I could not be freed from prison." "Oh, I'll certainly do that, Joseph," said the king's servant. "I wouldn't forget you ever." But the servant forgot all about Joseph, until one day the king had a dream. "I dreamed that 7 fat cows came out of a river. 7 thin cows came out after them. The thin cows ate up the fat cows. I had another dream of 7 good ears of corn on one stalk. 7 thin ears grew after the 7 fat ears and ate them up. This dream must mean something, but what is it?" asked Pharaoh. All his wise men and magic men couldn't help him. Then Pharaoh's servant remembered Joseph. "O king," he said, "when I was in prison, there was a man there who could interpret dreams." "Bring him here," commanded Pharaoh. So they brought Joseph. After Pharaoh told him the dream, Joseph gave him the meaning of it. "There will come 7 years of good crops in Egypt, O king. After that, there will be 7 years of famine. To save your people, king, look for a wise man. Let him take charge of storing up extra grain during the 7 good years. Then, when the famine comes, you will have plenty to eat." Pharaoh said, "Joseph, there is no man in all of my kingdom who has the wisdom of God like you do." The king gave Joseph his ring and put fine clothes on him and a gold chain about his neck. The people cheered and bowed before Joseph. The Hebrew slave had become ruler of the land of Egypt.
"'Tis true, oh yes, 'tis true. God's wonderful promise is true. For I've trusted and tested and tried it, and I know God's promise is true."
The land of Egypt enjoyed 7 plentiful years, just as Joseph had said. At the end of the 7th year, the rain stopped, and the fields became dry and barren. Soon everywhere people were out of food. "Give us food," they cried. "We're hungry." In the distant land of Canaan, Joseph's father, mother, and brothers also began to be in want. Jacob called for his sons. Sons," he said, "go down to Egypt and buy corn so that we may eat and live." So his brothers went off to Egypt. Only Benjamin, the youngest brother, remained at home. When they came to Egypt, they went to the ruler to buy some corn. They did not know that this Egyptian ruler was really their own brother. "You are spies," Joseph accused. "Oh no, we have just come to buy corn," said the brothers. Joseph asked about their home. When they told of their younger brother at home, Joseph bargained with them. "Very well then, if you are not spies, then to prove that you are truthful men, bring your brother when you come again. To make sure you will return, I will keep your brother Simeon with me." With heavy hearts, the brothers went home. Soon their corn was gone, so Jacob sent his sons back for more. "But father, we cannot go without Benjamin. That ruler may kill us if we do." After much persuasion, Jacob finally let Benjamin go. When they came to Egypt, they all bowed before the ruler, just as Joseph had dreamed many years before. When Joseph saw Benjamin, he left the room to cry. A great feast was prepared for Joseph and his brothers. Finally, Joseph told his brothers, "I am Joseph, your brother. Is my father still alive?" His brothers gasped. They couldn't believe their ears. What a reunion they had that day. Joseph sent his brothers home to get their families and mother and father. "You may remain here in Egypt until the famine is over," Joseph told them. When the brothers told their father that Joseph was alive and was the king's ruler in Egypt, he could scarcely believe it. They packed their bags, loaded their families in the wagons, and started for Egypt. On the way, God told Jacob his purpose for bringing them to Egypt. "So that your family will become a great nation." The day came when the tribe entered Egypt. Joseph rode in his chariot to meet them. For a long time, Joseph wept in his father's arms. Then he showed his family the land Pharaoh had given them to live in. It was called the land of Goshen. In his earlier years, Joseph had been treated badly by his brothers. But in spite of it all, God had a plan whereby Joseph would save his entire family. And he did.
If you see your brother standing by the road with a heavy load of seeds he sowed, and if you see your sister falling by the way, just stop and say, "You're going the wrong way." You've got to try a little kindness, show a little kindness, shine your light for everyone to see. And if you try a little kindness, then you'll overlook the blindness of a narrow-minded people on a narrow winding street. Don't walk around with the down and out, lend a helping hand instead of doubt. And the kindness that you show every day will help someone along their way. You've got to try a little kindness, show a little kindness, shine your light for everyone to see. And if you try a little kindness, then you'll overlook the blindness of a narrow-minded people, of a narrow-minded street.
The Hebrews, God's people, had lived in Egypt for many years. They were becoming so large in number that the Egyptians began to fear them. Their king, Pharaoh, had a conference with his top-ranking men. "What are we going to do with these Israelites? They will soon outnumber us and probably take over the country." "Make them slaves," someone suggested. A slave is one who is forced to work with little pay. So the Hebrews became slaves for the Egyptians. They were put to work making bricks for Egypt's fine buildings. If they worked too slowly, their masters would beat them cruelly. Ah! Still, Israel was growing in number. So the king ordered all the Hebrew baby boys to be thrown in the river. But there was one baby who escaped. There was born to a family of Levi a lovely baby boy. His mother didn't want her little baby thrown in the river, so she hid him in a closet. Whenever soldiers came to inspect for babies, they couldn't find him. After 3 months, the mother couldn't hide him any longer. Do you know what she did? She made a little boat out of reeds. Then she put her baby in the little boat and hid him in the river among the tall weeds. The baby's sister watched him from a distance. One day, Pharaoh's daughter came to the river to bathe. All of a sudden, there in the weeds, she heard a baby cry. Her lady helper lifted the babe out of the river. "It's one of the Hebrews' babies," she said. "Shall I get a nurse for the baby?" asked the helper. "Please do," said the princess. Do you know who they got to nurse the baby? The princess didn't know it, but it was the baby's mother. The princess named the baby Moses. Moses grew up in the palace and was an important man there until one day he killed an Egyptian. Because of this murder, Moses ran to the desert and stayed there for 40 years. In this desert, God called Moses to lead Israel out of Egypt. Although Moses was now 80 years old, his work had just begun. God had given Moses the job of leading the Hebrews out of Egypt. Pharaoh, the Egyptian king, didn't want to let the people go. So God sent many problems to Egypt to help persuade the king. After the 10th plague, the king finally agreed to let them go. It was a big job for Moses. The Israelites had now grown to number about 2 million people. After all these people left Egypt, many factories and stores and farms had to close down because they had no more workers. Once again, the king changed his mind. He decided not to let them go after all. "Let's go after them," he cried. "We need them to work for us." Away they went, the king, his servants, soldiers, chariots, and horses, a whole army. Moses and his people had not yet left the country. They had just arrived at the Red Sea and were camping beside it. All of a sudden, they heard the pounding of hoofs and saw Pharaoh's mighty army riding towards them. Mothers began to cry. Children screamed. The men came to Moses. "We should have stayed in Egypt, Moses. Look at the jam you've got us in now. The Red Sea is before us, and Pharaoh's army is behind us. We're trapped. Moses, we wish we would never have listened to you." God had led the people this far by a cloud. At night, it became a pillar of fire. Now he moved this cloud between the Israelites and the Egyptian army. The cloud became darkness, so Pharaoh couldn't see where to go. Then God spoke to Moses. "Take your shepherd's rod, Moses, and hold it over the sea." Moses did. Something wonderful happened. A strong east wind blew all night. It made the water in the middle of the sea to divide. The water stood in 2 heaps, one on the right, the other on the left. In the morning, a wide highway led right through the sea. Moses and his people walked through the sea on this highway. When King Pharaoh finally found them, he started after them through the sea. When the Egyptians were about halfway through the sea, the wheels of their chariots mysteriously fell off. God commanded Moses to hold his rod over the sea again. Like a mighty thunderstorm, the waters came crashing down, and Pharaoh and all his men drowned. The Israelites were safe once again. Their God had saved them.
On Jordan's stormy banks I stand and cast a wistful eye to Canaan's fair and happy land where my possessions lie. I am bound for the promised land. I am bound for the promised land. Oh, who will come and go with me? I am bound for the promised land. I am bound for the promised land. I am bound.
For 40 years, Israel had wandered in the wilderness between the Red Sea and Canaan. Moses was now dead. God had made Joshua Israel's new leader. God said, "Joshua, it is now time for you and Israel to cross the Jordan River and take your land." Joshua wondered, how are all these people going to get across the river? While he thought, God gave him the instructions. "Have the priests carry the ark and walk into the river. Let all the people follow the priests." After they had folded their tents, taken down their tabernacle, and packed their bags, the people followed the priests to the river. As soon as the priests' feet touched the water, the Jordan River divided, just like the Red Sea did 40 years before. When the last person had crossed and the priests left the river, the water that was standing on a heap roared down again. Now Israel was across the river, But they were faced with the great city of Jericho. Jericho was a most beautiful city. Fruit trees blossomed everywhere. There were many vineyards yielding grapes. It was a land called the land of milk and honey. But Jericho had great high walls around it, and great big giants lived in the city. This all made the people of Israel afraid. How could they conquer the city? They didn't have many weapons, and besides, the big giants were men of war. God said, "Joshua, you and your people shall march around the city once each day for 6 days. On the 7th day, you shall march around the walls 7 times. 7 priests shall blow 7 ram's horns, and the people shall shout." So Israel began to march. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. During this time, no one said a word. They just marched. 4 days, 5 days, 6 days. The people of Jericho began to get nervous. What are those crazy Hebrews up to anyway? They wondered. On the 7th day, they marched around the wall 7 times. At the end of the 7th time, the trumpets gave a long blast. The people shouted, and the walls of Jericho came crashing down. The people of the city all died, except for Rahab, who had believed the men of God. The battle was over.
You have reached the end of this program. There are 6 more exciting stories in each book and cassette tape in this Stories That Live series.